It's been a whopper of a breaking news day. We're covering all of it for you. We start with the man in charge of the Mueller investigation, Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker, and a hearing before the House Judiciary Committee that was both combative and contentious. Whitaker drawing a line in the sand today about his conversations with the president about the Mueller probe, and he did so after saying he wouldn't answer any questions about his conversations with the president.
Yes or no, at any point since that briefing, have you communicated any information you learned in that briefing to President Trump?
Mr. Chairman, I know that there is a unique
yes or no
special
question,
interest
sir.
in this. I'm
It's
sorry.
a yes or no question. Have you communicated anything you learned in that briefing about the investigation to President Trump? Yes or no?
Mr. Chairman, as I've said earlier today in my opening remarks, I do not intend today to talk about my private conversations with the President of the United States. But to answer your question, I have not talked to the President of the United States about the special counsel's investigation.
Whitaker also separating himself from other top officials, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Chris Wray, by refusing to refute the president's smear on Robert Mueller and defend the Russia probe.
Are you overseeing a witch hunt?
Congressman, it would be inappropriate for me to talk about an ongoing investigation.
Do you agree with the president's statement that the Russia investigation is a witch hunt?
As I mentioned previously, Congressman, I think it would be inappropriate for me to comment about an ongoing investigation.
Wow. But it may be Whitaker's bold statement that he hadn't spoken to Donald Trump about the investigation that undergoes the most scrutiny. Some Trump allies believed it was Whitaker's entire mission to end the Mueller investigation when he stepped into the role as acting AG. So it defies logic and reason to think that if landing the probe was his mission, he never spoke about it with the president, who is day in and day out obsessed with the Russia probe. Notably, Whitaker also refused to answer whether he'd discussed firing anyone from the Southern District of New York. That's where Donald Trump faces grave legal jeopardy.
I want to know whether you talked to President Trump at all about the Southern District of New York's case involving Michael Cohen.
Congresswoman, as I've mentioned several times today, I am not going to discuss my private conversations with the President of the United States.
So yes or no, did you?
No matter what the question is.
Yes or no, did you discuss with the President Trump anything about Michael Cohen?
Congresswoman, as I have expressed several times today, I am not.
Did you ever have any conversations with the president about firing or reassigning any personnel, U.S. attorneys or others who work with the Southern District of New York? With the president or anybody? Anybody at all? Did you ever have any conversations with anybody about reassigning or firing any personnel, including U.S. attorneys with the Southern District of New York?
Congresswoman, I sit on top of the Department of Justice, as you mentioned.
Did you ever have any conversations about anybody who works with the District of Virginia firing or reassigning? With anybody, not just the president, anybody at all?
Congresswoman, I am not going to talk.
Sounds like a hell yeah I did to me, but what do I know? We're joined by some of our favorite reporters and friends to help us sift through today's fireworks. Former Assistant Director for Counterintel at the FBI, Frank Figliuzzi's here. Former U.S. Attorney Chuck Rosenberg is back. With us on set in D.C., former federal prosecutor Paul Butler, NBC News national political reporter Carol Lee, and Sam Stein, politics editor at the Daily Beast. Big guns, all of them, for a big, big news day. Frank, I got to start with you. What was that?
Listen, I'm not kidding when I say I have interviewed terrorists who were more cooperative and respectful than Matt Whitaker was today. I got to tell you, I say that with sadness because the Attorney General role is America's lawyer. We are his client, and we're represented by the Congress members sitting in that room, and he treated us with utter disdain, sarcasm, barely trying to get through this seriously. This is basically thumbing your nose at oversight by the people. And the way he conducted himself today is an indication that he's not America's attorney. He's essentially seeing himself as Trump's attorney.
So let me, Frank, put on the table some of my reporting from this week about both the preparations for today's testimony and some of what I understand to be Whitaker's goals today. One, there was a lot of preparation, but not for the reasons we might believe there to have been preparation. Whitaker was auditioning for another job in this administration. Whitaker had an audience of one, and that was Donald Trump. And Whitaker had as one of his goals to be the Sarah Huckabee Sanders of the Justice Department. On those fronts, does that explain some of what we saw?
It jives with exactly what we saw today. He's auditioning for something. I'm thinking that possibly we'll see him run for office at some point. But yeah, I do think Trump's going to position him somewhere else. But here's the thing. Let's put out kind of a cautionary statement to everybody. If you've got skeletons in your closet, if you've had criminal fraud allegations about your past and your private sector involvement, probably not the best idea to raise your hand and say, I want in on a Trump administration job, because we've not seen the last of Whitaker. I'm telling you, the FBI, ironically, the organization he oversees in his current role, ironically, the guys and the women who protect him every day on a security detail, those are FBI agents at his house every morning, taking him to work, taking him around D.C. Those people belonging to those agencies are actually looking at him criminally, and he's not seen the last of the FBI. And anyone else who's got visions of being that partisan in secretary cabinet level roles needs to rethink their past before they sign up for what Trump is asking them to do.
There's so much here, Frank. I want to press on some of the substance of his answers, because I wonder if this statement that he offered today, and I know he wasn't, I don't believe him to have been under oath, but lying to Congress is in itself a felony. What about saying that he never talked to Donald Trump about the Mueller investigation? It just seems to defy reason if even Trump's allies have said publicly and privately that Whitaker's mission as acting AG was to land the Mueller probe. Whitaker's job before being acting AG was Sessions' chief of staff. He was put in that job, I understand, by former White House counsel Don McGahn after Sessions recused himself from the Russia probe to help filter some information back to the White House and the president. What are the chances, in your mind, Frank, that he never talked to the president about the Mueller probe?
It strains credulity to think that that kind of substantive conversation never took place. In fact, some of the longest pauses, if you look at his testimony today, some of the longest pauses, the point where you can see the wheels turning in his head, are when specifically he's asked about conversations with the president. And I think what we're headed to, Nicole, is likely this committee or others calling to testify the career officials at DOJ who helped prepare him for this testimony. What was discussed in that? Were there nuances? Well, you talked to the president, but no, you actually talked to an aide to the president, so you can say no if you're asked if you talked to the president. Those nuances need to be brought out. There needs to be transparency about this process, and I don't think these questions are over today.
Chuck Rosenberg, I want to get your thoughts, and I want to press on Whitaker and his decision to ignore the advice he got, to recuse, to override that advice, because I think that's important. But I think we'll be talking about Robert Mueller long after we're talking about Matthew Whitaker. And I just want to press you on this exchange. He was asked whether Robert Mueller was honest by Congressman Swalwell. Let's watch and talk about it on the other side.
Is Mr. Mueller honest?
Congressman, I have been on the record about my respect for Bob Mueller and his ability to conduct this investigation.
Do you believe he's honest? Yes or no?
I have no reason to believe he's not honest, so yes, I do believe he's honest.
So you don't believe you believe he's honest, you don't believe he's conflicted. Can you say right now, Mr. President, Bob Mueller is honest and not conflicted?
Congressman, I'm not a puppet to repeat what you're saying.
I'm not a puppet. it. You could have fooled me. Chuck Rosenberg, just talk about this posture that Matthew Whitaker is in vis-a-vis the Mueller probe, which he ostensibly oversees as the acting attorney general, at least at this moment in time that we gather, and just the contortions today over these answers. Refused to say it wasn't a witch hunt, something that Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein had no problem doing. Former Attorney General Jeff Sessions had no problem doing. Christopher Wray has no problem doing. They know it's not a witch hunt because they know the man and they know things about the investigation, which Matthew Whitaker should have as well, no?
You know, that's exactly the word. He's a contortionist. Nicole, it is so easy to say the following things. Bob Mueller is honest. Bob Mueller is straightforward. Bob Mueller is as true as they come. And this is not a witch hunt. Why can't you say those things? The entire Department of Justice, in fact, much of the nation is watching you today. I don't know how somebody could be that cowardly. I don't know how someone could dissemble that much. It really is distressing to me. Like you said, Chris Wray, good man, Rod Rosenstein, fine guy. I had no difficulty knocking down the notion that this is a witch hunt. It ain't a witch hunt. Never has been, never will be with Bob Mueller at the helm. And if Matt Whitaker purports to know him the way that we do, he would be able to say that in front of Congress, under oath, at any time. He couldn't do it. And that deeply concerns me.
I want to get to why that might be, but I first want to go to where I think the legal threats for the president lie, and that answer I played at the beginning about the Southern District of New York. He refused to say that he hadn't taken the step of trying to reassign individuals who work at the Southern District of New York, and he wouldn't say that he didn't try to do that. Why would that be?
Yeah, so first there's a predicate that we ought to discuss, and that is everybody right now in the Southern District of New York is a career civil servant. I believe the U.S. Attorney is not confirmed by the Senate currently in the Southern District. So he can't fire any of them. Reassigning career AUSAs would be extraordinary. All that said, we've discussed on your show, Nicole, the fact that what's going on in the Southern District of New York, the financial investigation of the campaign, of the inaugural committee, of the Trump Foundation, of the Trump Organization, of the Trumps themselves, is as important as the work that Bob Mueller is doing. And so you would also hope, although there's no reason to have any hope any longer in Matt Whitaker, but you would also hope that he would be able to say that he would protect the men and women in the Southern District of New York. He would see that they're able to do their jobs, that they would follow the facts to all of their logical conclusions. Why can't he do that? And that also, to me, is deeply, deeply concerning.
If you want to get to the bottom of whether Matthew Whitaker tried to obstruct the SDNY investigation, how at this point would you do that, Chuck?
Well, look, because they are career civil servants there, if anybody tried to obstruct their work, we will hear about that one way or another. I have always believed passionately in the mission of the Department of Justice and the FBI and all of its components. And I also know that you do not mess with their career civil servants, right? So I am assuming, because I've heard nothing to the contrary from the good men and women in the Southern District of New York, I am assuming that they are being permitted to do their work. It would also be nice if the person running the Justice Department would state on the record that I'm going to support their work. He doesn't have the courage to do that, but I am confident, Nicole, I am really, truly confident that they are going to pursue this investigation wherever it leads.
Do you think, Chuck, that we'll ever find out if a conversation took place between Donald Trump and Matthew Whitaker around the Cohen sentencing about getting SDNY to back off? Is it knowable whether or not that ever went down?
It's knowable, and it's knowable in a couple of ways. I mean, Frank hinted at one of them. I agree with Frank. The pauses, sort of the awkward, stares, the nervous glances tell you something, but they don't definitively answer the question. But Matt Whitaker would have talked to other people, and whether it's the folks preparing him for his testimony, the people on his staff, somebody knows who he talked to. And so while we may never get the truth from Matt Whitaker, and we almost will certainly never get the truth from President Trump, I believe there are people who know. Nothing remains secret very long. At some point, we're going to find out, I believe.
What struck me today is you sleep better at night thinking that the Justice Department, all the abuse they take, all the waves that crash on their shores, all the attacks on Comey and all the attacks on all the leadership of the FBI, all of them who are now gone, all the attacks on Rosenstein, all the attacks on Mother. You have in your mind this hope and this belief that they're all pushed back. What you saw today from Whitaker is that some of the water gets in. It gets in through Whitaker. It gets in through his office. He refused to say that he hadn't tried to intervene and reassign U.S. attorneys from the Southern District or other offices. I imagine that he didn't have the capacity to lie. I imagine that if he hadn't, he would have done what he did when pressed about Robert Mueller and said, no, that didn't happen. So what are you left with? What impression are you left with after watching Whitaker today?
You know, this is a man whose long silences, his pauses were suspicious. He would not answer the question about whether he talked to the president about Michael Cohen or about the Southern District investigation. Why not answer, of course I did not talk to the president about an investigation that implicates him. That would be unethical. That would probably be a crime. But he could not say that. He did establish himself as the Attorney General of President Trump's fantasies. Every time he had a choice between expressing fidelity to the rule of law and to the appearance of justice, or on the other hand, fidelity to Donald Trump, he chose President Trump. He does not understand that he's not the lawyer for President Trump. He's the lawyer for the United States of America. And today, in that role, he failed miserably.
The other thing that struck me is the recusal. If you refuse to recuse, and the president you serve is under investigation for obstruction of justice, I'm not sure that's not more damaging evidence for the president, who has said on the record in media interviews that he wants a fixer there. He wants his own Roy Cohn. What do you think of that?
Well, I think that you saw whatever the president wants. You saw today in Whitaker. I mean, it was so. You started it off the show like, yeah, this is exactly what this was. There was an audience of one, and he went out there to perform. I mean, some of the things he said just defy logic in terms of what we know about President Trump. The idea that a president who thinks all day long and all night long about his investigations, whether it's Robert Mueller or the Southern District of New York, wouldn't bring any of those things up when we know that he's brought them up with almost everyone who's been around him and doesn't respect traditional boundaries of law enforcement.
Or witness tampering. I mean,
the idea that he wouldn't do that is kind of, it's hard to imagine that that's the case.
And real quickly, this isn't just a post-mortem on Whitaker, because he's going next week. So the incoming Attorney General, if he's confirmed by the Senate, has also said that he won't obey the advice of the ethics officers at the Justice Department. So he says he'll listen if they tell him that he should recuse himself because of statements that Barr has made about the investigation. He'll listen, but he hasn't committed to following that.
I guess that's one good thing in terms of, if you want to talk about what that testimony would do to morale in the department, that he's a short timer and he's not going to be there for,
I sort of take Chuck's position on this, which is, while it was very disconcerting and odd that he couldn't give straightforward answers to what should be straightforward answer questions, we haven't really had overt signals from either SDNY or Team Mueller that they feel like they are being interfered with. And there are ways that they could send those signals. The other thing, if you are a champion of integrity and transparency at the Department of Justice, is that one of the big things that was a fear was that the Mueller report may come out while Matt Whitaker was the acting Attorney General, and he would have the power to essentially suppress it. It's pretty clear at this juncture that he will not be there when that report is finalized, and that someone else's decision will be to release portions of it, all of it, or just bottle it up. I will say, though, it is pretty evident that what he was doing today was auditioning for another job. We know that that's how he does this because there were reports that he would go on CNN before he would to get the job he has. So he clearly, this is a method that he uses. And I was just struck, we haven't talked about it, but it was galling almost that when Chairman Nadler started talking and asked a question, his response was, Mr. Chairman, your time is up, as if he was the one conducting the hearing into himself.
As if he were a reality TV guy. I want to get you on the record on something that's a little uncomfortable, but he's not thought of as he's not.
I'm a little nervous.
No, but he's not respected at the Justice Department in which he serves. He's not respected in conservative legal circles, and he's clearly not respected among Democrats. His incompetence for the time. Someone said to me, it will be apparent that he doesn't have anything that it takes to have the job he holds, even as acting. Was that clear to you?
Yeah, I mean, if we were to be honest about the situation, in no other administration, at least recently, would this person get anywhere close to this gig. He is not qualified for it for obvious reasons. He's way too close to the president politically. He is compromised in the fact that he did not recuse himself.
Yeah, but Bobby Kennedy was too close to JFK, but he was brilliant. I mean, this is not just about intimacy.
But it's not even that. It's like, if you look at his private sector career, too, and the nonprofit work that he was doing.
You wouldn't vet out of a background check if you worked in any.
And also, let's just be frank about the context, too. We are dealing with a incredibly delicate, potentially bombshell legal matter engulfing the presidency at the time of his temporary appointment to the role. This was not the same with Bobby Kennedy, obviously. And so in that context, he's clearly not qualified for the
Not up for the job. Constant theme.
I thought that that was one of the things that was struck me so much in watching the hearing, was that he was clearly not prepared. He was out of his depth. I mean, the way he was answering things, it was.
This is his first. Let's be honest.
Yeah,
this is his first
that's what I mean. It's not.
Which it should be terrifying.
And it shows.
It should be terrifying to everyone.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.